As long as you don't call me Jordan, everything is good.
Alrighty, well, let's get going. Jochen, good morning. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Like I said earlier, you are a smart guy, probably way smarter than me, but I will let you explain what Fahr Beer is about and whatnot and how you got into it.
So, I mean, well, I grew up in Germany, and I keep saying I have a lot of beer in my blood, or blood in my beer, whatever you want to
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
Say, my dad used to work for German breweries for most of his life, and I've been around beer all my life. I've done a bunch of internships in the brewery he was working for. Um,
always
been
just
on
part of the
trucks,
part of who you are.
deliver beer,
Yeah,
and but the funny thing is, I never like beer only came to my life in Canada,
huh.
really. So I did in back in Germany, I did an IT degree, and then went to university. IT back there was more of an apprenticeship. But then I went to university to become a biochemical engineer.
Yeah,
So biochemistry and biochemical engineering is really using enzymes or microorganisms to do something for you.
right.
Um, in this case, I was looking at genetically modifying yeasts to produce a high-value skin cream ingredient.
Hmm.
That was my honors thesis for my bachelor's. But then before I did that, I did a 1-year exchange with the URC, and I was in a little bit of neuroscience, dabbled around there a little bit, looking at nerve endings and how proteins are assembled there. Um, then I switched a lab and went to stem cell lab. Um, then went back to Germany, do my honors thesis, and then I thought, well, I really like Calgary, so I come back.
Really?
So I went back from Germany to Calgary in 2008 and started my master's
Yeah.
in medical science, using mouse stem cells that I genetically modified to look at, can we use them as protein production system, like a tool or factory essentially, right? Every little cell is a factory by itself.
Hmm.
That morphed a little bit into, oh, can I make a protein that potentially treats multiple sclerosis? And then that morphed further into when I fast tracked into a PhD program at the USC, it morphed into what can I do to make stem cell cultures more cheaper, so like more affordable. And so
Right.
like there was a whole bunch of stuff that I did research there. But getting a PhD is a lot of pain.
Yeah.
As I keep saying, PhD stands for permanent head damage.
Yeah. Right. That's a lot of work.
Really, really, as I said earlier, um, it's from banging your head against the wall too many times.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so what helps beer?
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, you had a Bachelor of Engineering in Biotechnology and then a
Yeah,
PhD in Biomedical Engineering.
exactly.
Oh, that's very impressive.
And an IT degree, like journeyman essentially, like quotes.
Okay.
But so during my PhD, a buddy of mine who I met in neuroscience, we started home brewing. And
Okay.
so he was working in a lab that was using sea urchins at a model organism. So they had a cold room that was nice at 9 degrees. So that was perfect fermentation temperature for beer. I think the researcher in charge still doesn't know that we fermented beer in his sea urchin cold room, but
That's awesome.
that's a different, longer story. Um, yeah, and then we went back and forth and like did a few brews, and I of course couldn't stop helping my engineering nature and over engineered one of my homebrew systems.
Okay.
Started making a bit more beer and entered competition, got a bunch of awards. I mean, in 2013, I got an award from the Van Brewers Award, so that's a home brewing competition.
Okay.
And out of 350 entries, it made first place. And that was just an ordinary Hefe. So the Hefe Weizen that we have right now out,
Yeah. Right. Right.
that is that recipe.
Okay.
And back then, I I called it maybe the wedding beer because we were engaged at that time, and I was like, oh, if that pans out. So it won, and I called it definitely the wedding beer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So
Um,
and when you graduated, did you take a job somewhere before you started Fahr
yes.
Beer?
So when I
Okay.
graduated, I was a project manager at a heat exchanger development company
Okay.
um, for about 3 months, and that ended badly. And then a week later, I was a senior scientist at a plant biotech company here in Calgary
Very cool.
for a year and a half, and then that ended badly. That doesn't make me look pretty good, but
Yeah.
that's really when I found out I'm really not an employee.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Yeah.
I really like doing my own thing, and kind of I put it against, like, I hated paying rent, and I don't mind paying a mortgage,
Yeah, for sure.
because when I pay rent, I pay somebody else's mortgage. It's like,
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
as well pay my own.
So
And it's kind of the same for me for my employment. So
what
then
year,
in
yeah.
2013, 2014, I started raising money,
Okay.
because just lost my job in January, and like, okay, oil price just crashed, and like, what am I doing now? Um, and then my wife tells me that she's pregnant. It's like, okay, now I have a little bit more pressure. So went out, raised a bit of money, and then started brewing a tool shed
Okay.
in February 2016,
Hmm.
2015, 2016. Yes, 2016.
Okay.
And the first pour was in Glenmore Landing at 1600 World Beer House, and on March 18th. I remember that one.
Oh, cool.
We've been on tap ever since there. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
We spent about a year or so, year and a half, brewing a tool shed. Did a couple batches at Alley Cat, and then in 2017 in October, we started brewing out of our own facility in Turner Valley,
Very cool.
and been there ever since. And it's been steadily climbing up, which is cool to see.
Yeah. Why Turner Valley?
Oh, I mean, the way we approach beer is very different, I feel, than Calgary breweries do it. The rent and business taxes were just crazy in Calgary, and I thought, well, Turner Valley really reminds me of my hometown.
Really?
My hometown is 300 residents. Turner Valley is 2,400, but
Yeah.
I grew up in the foothills of the Alps, and Turner Valley and Kananaskis, foothills of the Rockies. And even the landscape looks really close to where I'm from. And I talked a couple times to the mayor in Turner Valley at the time, and she introduced me to my landlord. And
That's awesome.
so that's how it went, right? And so what we are saying is, because we only make traditional styles, and we try to follow the German purity law as closely as we can here, we felt it's better for us to be a bit outside of Calgary. And Turner Valley is really just half an hour outside Calgary, on two highways that are cleared better in the winter than the Deerfoot, which is
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for us, it was really, essentially for myself, I was saying, well, while I really respect and like a bunch of the craft breweries in Calgary, I
Mhm.
don't want to be lumped in with a Calgary brewery,
Very
because
interesting.
we are so different, right? Like, when I say we are doing traditional beers, we are one of the very few in Western Canada.
Huh.
Typical craft brewery is way over there. I even have a shirt that says, "I'll promise to never produce an orange blossom cherry infused chocolate porter ever." It says it on the back of my shirt, not
Really
on this one, but a different one.
interesting.
And so I felt like we don't really fit into the overall crowd of the overall theme of Calgary brewery. So I wanted
Mhm.
to be a little bit outside of Calgary.
That's cool. Very cool.
It's not one way is the right way. It's just different approaches, right? And for
Right.
me, it was like, okay, I want to be a little bit different than everybody else.
Yeah.
I've always been a contrarian.
That's very cool. What is the German purity law and how does that relate to Fahr Beer?
So it really, the most famous one was enacted in 1516, so 500 years ago.
Yeah.
And I call it and I think it still is the world's oldest food safety law.
Okay.
Because back then breweries were using all kinds of stuff in beer, and that law regulated what can go into beer. Really was the first definition of beer. Back then they didn't know about yeast, but what they said is they can only use barley, hops, and water.
Okay.
And because they were reusing the barrels that they were fermenting the beer in, that had the remnants of the yeast in it, but they didn't know about the yeast at the time. So that's where those 4 ingredients really came from, right? And that's what we still try to adhere to. Funny enough, it also said that you had to, it defined boundaries on how much pubs could charge for a pint of beer or for a liter of beer.
Right.
And like it was different in summer versus winter because people would make all the money in summer and no money in the winter. And so the beer was more expensive in summer than the winter. It's kind of funny to see the kind of the economy like 500 years ago. And it set the price to about, I think I did like some research once. So for a liter of beer, you'd have to work about 15 minutes on an average job.
Okay, interesting.
So that was kind of neat.
Right.
And so for us, it's like, it's really painful to adhere to the purity law.
Yeah, like I would imagine it's a lot of work for you.
It is a lot of work because you're not allowed to take any kind of shortcuts.
Right. And do other breweries take shortcuts?
For example, sorry?
So other breweries would take shortcuts then and cut those corners.
Shortcuts can also mean technical ingredients that you add to, for example, anti-foam. Like some breweries use that to prevent boilovers in their kettle because you have to, when you brew beer, you steep your grain, you separate the liquid from the grain, from the husks, and then you boil it with the hops.
Okay.
And because there's a lot of protein in there, the liquid starts foaming up when it boils. It's kind of like when you make a stock, you see like, or boil pasta, you see that there's a whole bunch of foam on top when you start boiling. Breweries generally use anti-foam, so that breaks the surface tension of that specific liquid, and you don't get that foaming action. But it's against the purity law, so we are not using it. Same with rice hulls. So people use rice hulls when they have a lot of wheat in their malt bill, and wheat doesn't have husks, so the filter bed that you create with husks isn't as great when you use a lot of wheat. So people use rice hulls. We don't use that either. So really, and then we're going to the fermenter and we add the yeast there, and the only thing we do is again, some beers are dry hops, so you add hops during or after the fermentation. But we don't add any firm cap, which again prevents foaming over or like making a mess on the floor, or because it's some yeast collects at the top and then it blows out and it makes a big mess. So we don't add any of that either. We don't use any clarification agents. So like some companies use silica sol gels to like precipitate protein and make clear beer, and of that we don't use that. We use filtration only. So it's really adhering to the purity law forces you to be a much more technical brewer than more of an artist. So I would say the craft breweries that are out here, while there's a lot of technical aspects too, because it's brewing, it's still a technical engineer task, but they have a lot more freedom. They gave themselves a lot more freedom to like artistically express themselves.
Really?
Versus for us, it's really, we want to have the beer in the foreground and the beer flavor beer. So we are very technical.
Right.
Is that why makes sense?
Is that why the hangovers are so bad from craft beer?
I wouldn't say that.
I've always wondered why my head pounds the next day from craft beer, you know?
For my own personal experience, it's the hops, because I react to hops.
Oh.
And so if you have massively dry hop beers, like New England IPAs or double IPAs, they're massively dry hop beers, there's a lot of hops in it. And to me, I drink one pint of IPA a night and I have a terrible headache the next day.
Yeah, so that's what I was curious. Why?
So I blame the hops, but I have nothing to prove that.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Because I've been to a few craft breweries before, and they'll have like maybe 2 or 3 pints, and the next
Mm-hmm.
day you'll feel it.
Yeah. And like we see hops more like the use for it as a spice.
Uh,
So we add compared to the ordinary craft brewery in North America, we add like homeopathic doses of hops. So we're like our highest IBU count I think is 34 IBUs. So like and
okay,
you get an IPA that can have up to 80. Or you
really?
get a New England IPA that has low IBUs, but it's massively dry hopped. So you add bunch of hops at the end.
Hmm.
So we probably use 10-20% of hops compared to a different
Uh,
craft brewery, right? An average craft brewery that makes mainly New England IPAs, all
right.
the hops forward beers, right? So for
No,
us, really, the goal for us is to make balanced beers.
mm,
So I keep saying in beer you have four major pillars, right? One is your water, one is your yeast, one is your malt, and one is your hops. And if you have a balanced beer, all those pillars are kind of close to each other,
right.
right? In a wheat ale, for example, you have one outgoing like pillar, and that
Yeah.
would be the yeast contribution because that adds banana and clove flavors, which are the dominant um, flavor profiles in wheat beers, right?
Hmm.
In a New England IPA or an IPA or dry hop IPA, your hops pillar is huge, right?
Really? Hmm.
But everything else kind of drops off.
Interesting.
So when we look at making our lagers, for example, in a well-made lager, you have everything kind of muted. Like you
Hmm.
don't want really a lot of character from the yeast because it's supposed to be a neutral yeast. Your water then needs to balance or needs to highlight what you want in your beer. So you want to make a multi-year lager or hop year lager.
Hmm.
And then the hops generally in a lager, at least in a German lager, it's more like bitterness and balancing the sweetness and a
Mhm.
little bit more floral and herbal versus in a North American lager, it's more fruity, more forward, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's the major differences.
That is
I'm
cool.
getting very technical here, but
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've always wondered. I've also always wondered why the beers at the Saddle Dome. I don't know if you ever heard of heroin beers. Why do those seem to affect you more than others?
I don't know about that one. I have like
Okay.
it's I I feel a lot of that is atmosphere.
Well, yeah, the urban legend is the gas builds up in the lines or something, or
Well, they do have long lines and they use beer gas. Everybody does that has a draft system, right? So
yeah,
there's 70% nitrogen
yeah, exactly, the nitrogen or something. Is that true?
in there. Again, I don't know. Sorry? So
Um,
I don't have I don't have any evidence or any knowledge that like why that would be. I would say it's more subjective
okay.
because you're with a lot of people, you're in a
Yeah,
stadium, you're
right.
drinking. Like your atmosphere has as much to do with how you feel as what you drink.
Hmm. Okay.
That's my own opinion about it.
Huh.
But again, I have nothing to back it up.
Yeah, for sure. No,
More
I've always
anecdotal.
wondered. Yeah. When you got the company going, did you have to put a lot of money in? Did you take a big
Well, I didn't
loan?
have a lot of money.
Okay.
Um, just coming out of grad school and just barely working like a couple years in a job. I didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of money, so I went out and I raised a bunch of money through investors.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, so
So,
that was a long journey.
yeah, I would
But
imagine.
I have a really group of investors together that are very patient with us, and they know that you don't start a brewery and you make millions of dollars. Like breweries are, I keep saying it's a turtle
Yeah,
in the
for sure.
turtle and the hare race,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
So, and as far as what makes Fahr Beer unique, we had talked about sustainability and the German purity law. What parts of sustainability have you built into the company?
So we have quite the plan, and it's not gonna be quick to execute, but some of the plan we have already executed. So, for example, we use a reverse osmosis system to purify our water. So we take tap water, we run it through a carbon filter, a water softener, and then reverse osmosis. And what it does, it takes essentially all the minerals out of the water, so we start with a blank slate.
Hmm.
And that's where we deviate a little bit from the purity law because we add minerals back in
Okay.
based on the beer style and based on what we want to highlight. So we go to the length of taking everything out of the water and then adding only that stuff back that we want in order to highlight what we want the product to highlight, right? So we're taking a very, very engineering approach to that.
Mm-hmm.
But then a reverse osmosis unit is really just a big filter.
Mm-hmm.
So once like tap water comes in, near distilled water comes out, and then concentrated tap water comes out the other side. So we are just working with a company in Calgary. It's called Earthmaster.
Okay.
And they delivered us with a grass seed, which is grasses that grow around the brewery.
Mm-hmm.
And they took those seeds and they coated them with bacteria. And our soil around the brewery, there's no topsoil. It's just really loamy gravel soil. It's very, very, very poor soil.
Yeah.
And their bacteria coating on the seed enabled the grass to grow on that poor soil with our concentrated tap water.
Really?
So really, when somebody comes to our tap room in Turner Valley and they see this scraggy-looking grass right now, that's really a test field for up north for reclamation and oil field reclamation efforts.
Really?
They're testing that our brewery effluent to apply up north in the oil fields.
That is very cool.
And then we have when we lauter, so we separate the liquid from the grain after it's been steeped. Those husks, they go into a bin, and the same day they get picked up by a farmer that has a cow pasture about 15 minutes away from the brewery.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes all in there. The cows love it. The farmer calls it Jurassic Park when it comes to the bin because
That's awesome.
it's really cow crack. They go absolutely nuts for it. And then so that's number 2 of our sustainability. Number 3 is we spent the money and we got a nitrogen generator. So in your air that you breathe, you have about 79% nitrogen.
Okay.
We take the air, run it through an air compressor, an air storage tank, and then we lift the nitrogen from 79% to about 99.5%.
Okay.
And we store that on site. And what it does is we use that nitrogen then to get all the air out of the fermenters, the air out of our tanks. We use it to push beer from one fermenter to the other. Because once beer is fermented, you don't want it to be exposed to any oxygen. Because then you get off flavors, off color, the beer won't taste great at all. Right? We are a very small brewery still, but compared to other breweries, what they do is they would use CO2 for that. And so that CO2 is generally coming from fossil fuel, like it's fossil CO2. So they would buy it from Praxair, say, and they would use it to fill the tank, dump it, fill the tank again, and then you essentially excluded oxygen from the tank, right?
I see.
We do the same thing, but we do it with nitrogen. And that nitrogen came from the air that we breathe in. So that's not a fossil, so that's neutral to the atmosphere, right?
Right.
We have a few other initiatives planned that I'm not quite ready to divulge yet, but it's gonna be, if we can do it properly and like in a time frame that I want, we're probably gonna be the greenest brewery in North America.
That is really cool. So,
or the most sustainable brewery in North America, I should say it that way.
In layman's terms, you're taking the water from the brewery to help grow grass for the reclamation sites. You're taking seeds to give to cows to eat?
So the husks from the barley
Right.
and the leftovers from the wheat,
Or,
that goes directly to the cows,
and then the
15 minutes away from the brewery.
third thing is the
nitrogen that we use instead of CO2. And we get the nitrogen from the air, and whereas the CO2 that we would have to buy, that would be fossil fuel derived CO2. So this is, when you look at the atmosphere, this is neutral to the atmosphere, what we are doing here.
That was really cool. I had no idea. Do you have to, are you going to market that's part of the business, or is that just something you do for yourself? Or
currently it's doing for ourselves because it's important to myself. Like we have to be more sustainable all around. But we will talk about it in our website. We're just working on that section on it still. We've redone our website lately, but it's still a little bit of a work in progress.
Well, when I saw the beer, like you said, I thought you were from Germany. I didn't know it was Turner Valley. So I didn't know anything about sustainability. I just thought it was a German beer originally.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. And like we first had bottles out, and the bottles were looking so German that even liquor store owners were confused, and they would put us in the import aisle.
Really?
And then we would get angry mails from customers saying, "Why is your beer so much more expensive than Erdinger?" And my standard response was, because Erdinger is about 24 million times bigger than we are.
Yeah.
And with scale comes price reductions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Efficiencies, right?
We've noticed that in the coffee business too.
Yeah, it's exactly the same for you guys, right? I mean, the bigger you get, the cheaper your product gets, or the lower your cost gets.
Yeah, it's tough to compete with Kicking Horse when their coffee goes on sale in Safeway.
Yes, and it's like at $9.99 a pound or so.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And that's the same thing, right? Like, as you only have so much power compared to the bigger guys, right? Because you're so much smaller. It starts with, for example, I mean, we're using bags right now. If you had silos, the cost would go down drastically.
Yeah.
Right? But it costs a lot of money to get silos, right? And you have to justify a silo, you have to be a certain size. And it's all a daisy chain of events that lead to ultimately reduction in cost, which then leads to bigger growth, right? It's a bit,
chicken and egg sort of thing.
It's a bit of a math problem.
Yeah. Well, our plan has always been to grow. As soon as we had the volumes out, we would expand and get another piece of equipment or upgrade in that sense. I don't know if do you view it the same way?
Yes. So we have a 5,400 square foot facility in Turner Valley.
Yeah.
And we've outgrown it now.
Right.
So we have a really good landlord, and we're about to double the square footage of the building. And that's the nice thing about Turner Valley, because we are sitting on a pretty big parcel of land, so we can do it.
The
town really wants the business, so they're very supportive of it. And I can only commend the town. I mean, it's tough to be a small municipality in these days.
Yeah.
But they've been very good to us, and I would love to have more businesses in town too.
Yeah. So your philosophy's been to grow the business, and then once you have the volumes, maybe take out another loan or build out from there, right?
Exactly. Or even better would be to finance it through cash flow, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's a bit of a dream.
Yeah.
But it's not that big of a dream, I think.
Right.
It can be done, I think.
Well, you look at certain companies around, and the good examples that they stayed 100% owned by the company, or all they took was debt, or very few shareholders. So that it is possible.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? I didn't have a lot of money when I came out of grad school, so I did have to put in some investors. But mind you, having investors is not the worst thing in the world.
Right.
I mean, if you have a good group that are all aligned with the vision of the company, like a bunch of them have helped me out a big time. that's a nice thing about having investors, right? I mean,
Yeah.
when something happens, you're not only dependent on yourself.
Right.
The flip side is you're also responsible towards them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nothing in life comes without risk.
Yeah. Did you meet the group of investors through family and friends? How did you get
Yeah,
in
I'm
touch with
I'm a
those
pretty
people?
outgoing kind of guy.
Okay.
So as soon as I got one, like they introduced me to others, and
uh,
so it's not one group, it's a bunch of individuals.
I see.
And that's what I kind of wanted. I never wanted to have an institution investor. I never wanted to
Yeah.
have like a venture capitalist as investor, and I don't have any of those. Like, it's all private individuals that really had faith in what I was doing and my vision and my talent of creating recipes that could work and
Yeah.
are different enough from the current offering of the market.
I
And
see.
getting all those awards that we have gotten in the last few years, that's proving my point too, right?
Right. I would imagine the sustainability aspect is probably a good sell too. There doesn't seem to me as many companies focused on that.
Yeah, I mean we've been working with AHS for years now because I have a reverse osmosis unit in house that's very big,
Hmm.
and I've been trying to collect rainwater and use it and clean it up and then use it for our brewing.
That's cool.
But it's not allowed by AHS or CMHC because it's considered gray water and you're not allowed to use
Mm.
gray water for anything.
Hmm.
So I'm really happy with what Village did with their wastewater beer that was in the news lately.
I didn't see that. What was that?
I think they got together with a UFC researcher and a wastewater treatment plant, and they used wastewater and cleaned it up and then used that in their
Uh,
in their brewery for a
that's
test
cool.
batch.
Hmm.
All the power to them, because the more we can reduce, like especially water, like brewing is a very water intensive process,
Right, right.
and if we can reduce water that we have to take out of aquifers or from towns, then that would be the way to go.
Yeah,
My ultimate vision is to use all the brewery effluent because I have the sewer system separate from the brewery and the household sewer
right.
that's there. My vision is to reuse as much water as I put down the drain for cleaning, etc.
Yeah,
So I could like I'm just working with a group in the Diamond Valley on a bit of a proposal and to see how we can capture that brewery wastewater, clean it up, take all the particles out, neutralize the pH, and then run it through our RO unit to actually reuse that water that we actually put down the drain.
that's
Like,
cool.
we spent a lot of money. We have stainless steel drains because of that. Like I put in stainless steel drains, and they're really expensive,
Hmm.
but they're food safe.
Right.
So from the very beginning, I had that sustainability in mind.
Hmm.
And so it's another project that I'm hoping that we can get started on soon.
That's really coincidental. I'm not sure if you knew or not, but we've done podcasts. We've done a little mini series on the ESG subject, environmental
Mhm.
social governance, and this kind of falls right in with that subject. I didn't know if you knew that or not, but
No, I did not.
yeah, that's
I did it because I'm convinced that there is possibilities and options and opportunity, especially for breweries and especially like it's not only breweries, it could be applied to dairy processing
yeah,
companies, even meat processing companies. It's all really water intensive processes, right? And I think it's just responsible for all of us to see how we can reduce that waste. And
absolutely.
ultimately, it's better on cost anyways. If you don't have to buy the one because you reuse your own water, then it lowers your own cost as well, right? But again, with quantity comes opportunity.
Yeah. Well, one thing we've noticed or have seen is the trend towards ESG and actual money that is being invested or capital funds that are being put together because of
Yeah,
ESG. And whether companies can actually make a profit on a lot of these things is still up in the air, but it just seems like there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of money looking to be invested in companies
exactly.
that follow those.
Yeah. I mean, right
principles.
now, all of those solutions cost a lot of money, right?
Yeah,
That's the hurdle,
right.
right? Um, I'm banking on the fact that in not too long of a future, the prices for those reclamation units are going to come down.
Hmm.
And as soon as that's the case, then it's worth looking into, right?
Yeah,
But if you have a brewery that has a 5 hectoliter brew house and 10 hectoliter tanks, like that really just supplies their own tap room,
yeah,
it might not be worth for them, right? But like we are having a 35 hectoliter brew house, and we ferment 7,500 liters at a time.
yeah,
Then it becomes a bit more pertinent
right.
to look into that route, right? Because instead of 50 liter of cleaning solution to clean a tank, we use 400 liters, right?
Yeah,
And if you can catch that, and cleaning solution usually comes back fairly clean
hmm.
to begin with,
Yeah,
you can catch that, reuse it,
yeah,
then that saves a lot of stress downstream, right? I mean, even if you look at the sewer, for example, and the water treatment plants,
yeah,
they really don't like a lot of that stuff the breweries put down the drain, right?
yeah, for sure.
So if you can side stream a lot of that stuff and you use it on site, everybody wins.
Yeah,
Everybody.
yeah. Well, and it seems like I said, a lot of these investors and venture funds are just looking for companies that have viable business plans that involve ESG. So maybe that's an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity for you guys if you ever need money, if you need to raise money again, because you can demonstrate a sustainability.
Mm-hmm. I
It's a
mean,
no-brainer.
I myself have a research like background, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
we're always open to research projects.
right.
So if anybody wants to do a research project on a brewery
Yeah,
wastewater, or like the one of the big concerns that I have is when you actually make a beer and you add the yeast to the liquid,
yep.
the yeast turns the liquid into beer. But it's the same as when you make a bread dough. When the bread dough rises,
Hmm.
all the bubbles in there, that's CO2.
Okay.
But that CO2 came from last year's harvest, which means that CO2 came from last year's atmosphere.
Right.
So if you can catch that off gas from the fermenter, and that's a lot actually,
Hmm.
and you can purify it, and you can recompress it, then we reduce our need for external CO2 drastically. But and that solution exists, but it's about $500,000.
Really?
So
Yeah.
if somebody has $500,000 to like kicking around, that'd be great to put a CO2 reclamation unit in, because then what happens is the CO2 that was in the atmosphere last year
Right.
gets released into the atmosphere this year, and instead of when you carbonate a beer with CO2 that you buy from say Praxair,
Yep.
you take 65 million year old CO2 and you release it into the atmosphere this time, right?
Huh.
I mean, it's not a big quantity, relatively spoken, but
Yeah.
everything counts in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of grants and Alberta Innovate funding for that sort of stuff too. Have you ever looked into that?
Uh, like I have to be a bit better, quite frankly, to look into the grants. But
Yeah, I guess you're focused
um,
on making beer.
we're just focused on actually getting our business up and running properly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So sometimes initiatives like that have to take like um, a back seat.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Having that said, it's always in the back of my head. Every decision we make, we look at, does that have an impact on the
Yeah,
business, on the environment, on the people, right?
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
three big things.
That's cool.
Like what I want to do is I don't want to load too much stress on my employees. I don't want to load too much stress on the environment, and I don't want to load too much stress on the business itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's really a tricky balancing act.
Well,
Like balancing on a chair that has three legs.
absolutely. I think some of those funds are actually just available as grants too, like they're not loans or anything. It might be something worth looking into eventually when you
Yeah.
have the time.
Well, again, the problem is usually those grants are like 20% of the total purchase cost.
Yeah,
If it's a really
exactly.
good grant, it's 50%. And then it's
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
if you look at a CO2 reclamation unit, then we still would have to put in 250 grand
Right.
of our own money.
Hmm.
That's a lot of money for a small business.
Yeah, for sure. How many employees do you have now?
Um, Currently, there's 2 full-time,
And
including
yourself?
myself,
Yep.
a couple a few contractors, a few canning line staff, and we just hire our taproom staff as part-time employees. So they're not
Okay.
contractors, they're actually employees. Um, Again, because we think it would be easy to hire a taproom staff as a contractor. They're very used to it. But if you hire them as employees, they get the extra EI payments, they get
Yep.
the extra CPP payments. Again, that's a bit of a social responsibility, right? That you have as a company. It's like we've always I've always looked at employees as we treat them well, they treat the business well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as an employer, you do have a responsibility to make sure that your employees are well looked after, um, as much as a company can afford at the time, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That was part of me opening up my own company. Like the last CEO that I was working for, it ended in a screaming match.
Mm.
Um, and I left that office and I thought I can be a better leader than you are.
Yeah, for sure.
So I went out and started raising funds for my brewery.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, I've been laid off in the past and I've quit jobs in the past and had bad experiences with employers
I've
and
been fired twice in a row. And so
yeah,
that's when I knew I was like, okay, no, I've had it. I'm not an employee.
that's
I learned
awesome.
my lesson, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably
So
quicker
that's,
learner than me on that one.
I just needed 2 kicks in the rear end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you really learn what you don't want to do or how you shouldn't treat employees, that's for sure.
Exactly. And part of it is a challenge too. I like charting new ground. And if I
Yeah.
have to take over like work from other people, it takes me a lot more energy to get into it than
Yeah.
break new ground myself.
Yeah.
That's
It's
just who I am.
a lot easier to wake up in the morning when your own money's on the line and when you have your own
Exactly.
initiatives. When
That's
you
exactly it.
when you raised the money from your investors, what was your promise to them? Was it a big payout at the end or sort of a dividend along the way or
It what I promised them was there will be different dividends, but we don't know exactly when.
mm,
The problem with the brewery is to actually make a batch of beer is fairly cheap,
yep.
but to get all the equipment in place to make that cheap batch of beer
Hmm.
is very expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
So when you start a brewery, and it's the same with a lot of manufacturing companies,
Hmm.
you have a high debt load at the beginning
Right.
because you have to spend a lot of dough. Like I have spent a good 7-digit number
Yeah.
on that brewery,
Yeah.
and it has to be all paid back, right? So
Hmm.
my premise to the investors was invest early. You'll have an increasing share price, an increasing valuation,
Right.
and once we get profitable, we're gonna start handing out dividends. But the dividends have to be in line with our growth forecast. So, and that made my investors quite patient, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
The and I took my time with every single investor and made sure that attitude and vision are
Yeah.
very aligned with what I wanted to do with the brewery and what I wanted to achieve with the brewery, right?
Right. Hmm.
Um, I said no to a lot of people, and I heard a lot of no,
Yep.
right? Especially like when the oil price crashed down to $30.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, "I'm keeping my powder dry right now,"
Yeah, for sure.
and um, and I respect that, right?
Hmm.
And I talked to a bunch of other entrepreneurs along the way while I was raising money, and they said, "Well, how do you deal with somebody saying no to your business?" And I said, "Well, you move on, right?"
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's a different and a touchy subject for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and not a lot of people deal with rejection. And when you go out and you go out there and you put yourself on the plate and you say, "Look, I've never made a business before. I've never had a brewery before.
Yeah.
I have a PhD in biomedical engineering, but I won these homebrew awards, and I have
Mhm.
this education background, and here am I, and here's my drive.
Yeah.
That's to get comfortable saying that to people. That takes practice, and it takes um,
Yeah.
it takes
Takes a bit of confidence to get out there and do that.
confidence or ignorance, either
Yeah.
one.
Did you start the brewery with the
They're really
idea?
really closely linked.
Yeah. Was the idea you were trying to solve a problem that good beer didn't exist in Canada and whatnot, or was it more just a passion for your own passion?
It's a little bit of both. Like when I came over, and I had even the imports didn't taste the same as back home.
Okay.
And I looked, and it's like at the time, like in 2008, there weren't that many craft breweries around, right?
Yeah.
Because of the laws that were still in place at that time.
Hmm.
Um, so I started drinking traditional from
Okay.
Big Rock,
Yeah.
and funny enough, Coconut Gold.
Yeah.
Um, um, but it's like, to me, it's like, okay, there's nobody else here that really makes German styles exclusively.
Hmm.
And I felt at the time I had a pretty good palate on what I want to taste in a German beer.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, stereotypes are sometimes useful. They save a lot of time. I still have my German accent, so
Yeah.
I can back up my German heritage with a
Right.
German beer. So I went and did a German beer.
So it was kind of
We
a
started out with a Hefeweizen, which was our only beer for about a year and a half.
okay.
One beer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still our best seller to date.
Huh. I mean, everyone always says you're supposed to solve a problem in the marketplace when you start a business, but you know, passion is something that needs to weigh into the decision as well, right?
Absolutely. If you don't have passion for it, people see that, people smell that, especially if you talk to a seasoned investor.
Hmm.
If there's no passion there and you're just blatantly doing it, okay, I'm gonna do that, and I do it for 5 years and I sell the business, you know there's no passion,
Yeah, for sure.
right? That's not saying that if the right offer came in, like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
all do that, we all do that to put food on our plates.
Well, you got to make
Like
money for sure.
we're not
Yeah.
starting a company for plain humanitarian reasons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Nobody does.
No.
Nobody.
Well, you can't run a company for all, you know, you have to make money. That's the definition, right? It's
Exactly.
a little money.
And yeah, and so it's like what I was saying is I see this as an investment for myself as well, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I have no plans of selling it, but that's not saying I have no plans of selling it ever.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Um, I've always been a bit of a realist, Barry. I keep saying I'm an optimistic realist.
Yeah.
Um, because for me, it's like, okay, if things go well, why not keep it going, right?
Mhm.
If somebody came in and offered me the right of money, like, well, I'd consider it. But then again, it would have to fit the profile of the company that would take me over
Yeah.
in a case of me taking over, would have to adhere to the standards that I set for my company.
Hmm.
So again, it goes back to the social responsibility too,
Yeah.
right? Like just because somebody gets an offer for a brewery or for a coffee company for buyout doesn't mean the offer is always good,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And so there's a lot of factors that play into that kind of decision, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking purely hypotheticals now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I didn't think we would go into that kind of discussion,
Yeah.
but that's the thing, right? So it's breweries are very, very romanticized these days.
Mm.
Like you don't make a lot of money in brewing. You don't.
But right.
Right? There's um for the reasons that I
until you
mentioned earlier, right?
until you get big, until you get larger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like as an entrepreneur, your payout comes when your company is being bought, and that's true for a brewery, for a bakery, for a meat processing plant, for an oil company, right?
That's so true.
It's universal truth. Like as a founder of a company, you do not make money until the business is sold.
Yeah, large amounts. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. So that's where your payoff comes, right? Eventually, no matter what anybody in my industry or anybody else says, that's the end goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, or at least
or to create a legacy, right?
Yeah, sure.
That would be another goal, right? But everything else in my mind, and here's where I'm very too blunt for my own good, is a negotiation tactic.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And so I leave it at that because otherwise I just run my mouth way too badly.
Well, I mean, for Rose Bros Coffee, we love coffee and chocolate. We have also sold chocolate too, and we'll admit we're not the best coffee roasters, and we get Bernard Callebaut to make our chocolate for us, but we're really passionate, or at least I'm really passionate about helping the environment and giving back. So that's been the kind of the drive for the business, is to kind of create something that gives back, and it's a product you love, and all of those things, right?
Exactly. I mean, no small part of it is like you wanting to fulfill your own dream and your own life and your own vision that you have for yourself, right? I mean, that's no small part of it.
Yeah, no, it does weigh in. You get a little older and you're like, okay, I got to do something here that, means something a little bit.
Exactly. Something meaningful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, and like it takes everybody a while to figure out what's their true passion, what they're really good in. It's funny, like I was in Germany and I had to quarantine for 2 weeks, so I started renovating the basement. But then I had a plumber in like just a few days ago after quarantine, and his background was he was a chef in his earlier life, and he went up to the like top of the scale of payment, like pay, and then he said, "You know what? This is not great. My passion is in plumbing. It's better hours. It's like I can be my own boss. I help people directly, like." And so he went and became a plumber, right? And
that's cool.
Me, that's the kind of person that I really value.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it resonates, right? We tend to like connect to people that resonate with where your own path is.
Yeah. Well, I think, you can argue about Tesla and whether it's a good company and whether it's actually profitable and whatnot, but I've read that, well, one of the main reasons it's so successful is it kind of has that higher purpose or higher mission attached to the company, and that's where a lot of the fans come from.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of people, whether it's, there's a lot of debate about Tesla, but I think that resonates with a lot of people as they had a kind of a higher mission, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that resonance is another big deal, right? For us, we were saying, first and foremost, our company has to be about beer, right? And then marketing is a tool to sell the beer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
We could have spent a lot more money in marketing and a lot less money on the beer, right? But because you're passionate about beer, that comes back now, because people that try our beer generally come back for a second or a third time.
Yeah.
Right. And if we didn't have the plan of saying, okay, we have to nail our beers first and make sure those are top quality, they're consistent. When people get them, they know what they get. There's no surprises to the up or downside, right? Like it's a stable product. You know what you're getting every single time. Then in the long run, that's better than having a huge amount of marketing.
Yeah.
And you get a whole bunch of one-time buyers, but they don't necessarily come back.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So what that does, it's a bit of a different approach. Like a consistent product builds customer loyalty.
Right.
And I hear that complaint a lot in especially my industry, that there's no customer loyalty anymore.
Hmm.
And I feel that the fact that we get a lot of customer loyalty is because we only have a certain amount of products out.
Hmm.
Like we have at any given time we have less than 8 products,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
and that includes a lemonade, that includes a
Yeah.
non-alcoholic beer, that includes a radler, right? And then
Right.
our 3 core beers, and then maybe a seasonal or two at the like next to it, right,
Mm-hmm.
left and right of it.
Mm-hmm.
But what that does is we don't have the requirement or the need to come up with something new every month, right?
Right.
Like we started creating followers for the beer itself, for the product, and not necessarily for the brand only.
Right. Right.
That process is a very slow process,
Yeah.
because what marketing does is it brings your product into a lot of people's hands quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the backup on the quality of the product,
Yeah.
or you change your product every time, then you can have a lot of marketing and you get a lot of first-time buyers, but not necessarily a lot of loyalty, right?
Yeah.
Now, those are two very extreme points, like that I
Absolutely.
just outlined. So that
Yeah.
the answer is probably somewhere in the middle,
So in the middle. Did
right?
you get a distributor? Have you had distributors in the past, or do you do it all yourself?
Well, I outsourced my sales to a sales agency.
Hmm.
It's called Broken Barrel, and Neil Smithson, who's running it, he's had experience with German beers,
Okay.
like decades long, right?
Right.
Selling it in North America.
Okay.
And so we thought there was a really good fit
Yep.
there. Um, and so far it's been working pretty well. We did a project with Mount Royal University last year
Okay.
on marketing with their
Okay.
4th year students, and
That's cool.
out of that program, I hired one of the students to do my social media.
Hmm.
So again, giving it back a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, the balance between marketing and a good product. We had the same dilemma at Rose Rose Coffees. You can roast lower quality beans and provide lower quality coffees, but the only way we ever thought we'd compete is if you had the premium coffee brand,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of coffee companies out there, but also just because I don't want to drink lousy coffee myself.
That's exactly it. Like
I drink it in myself, my own coffee.
exactly. I mean, why would I take out like one of those like instant coffees from a machine versus
Yeah.
like a hand pour nice, it's been done with care,
Yeah.
and you can taste it in there, and it's the same with everything.
Hmm. So I guess you
Like
don't drink much Budweiser beer then.
no. So, in fact, actually, I'm not drinking as much beer as I used to.
Really?
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem because with my own beer, I'm a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So I try to find a flaw every single time I drink a beer.
Right. Right.
And so it becomes a professional chore rather than an enjoyment.
Yeah. Is beer is kind of like personal preference, right? There's no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's very subjective. Same with coffee. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
some people don't like the fruity aspects of some coffees. Some people don't like the chocolate aspect. Although chocolate, I learned, is a flaw in the roasting.
Right.
But um, but but again, is it wrong? If people like it, it's not, right? If it's right and people don't like it, it might not be the right one for the market. And
Yeah.
that's always a bit of a fishing expedition, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Oktoberfest is coming up. That's obviously a
Yes.
big part of your company. How does that play into your plans and whatnot?
So we just sent a bunch of flats of Oktoberfest beer to Connect, and the first couple liquor stores have already started ordering it. So um, be excited for them appearing in the stores very soon here.
Okay.
And
So,
we have it out in the tap room already.
okay.
Um, it's a bit of a sneak peek.
And do you go to Oktoberfest in Germany yourself, or is that
I've been.
okay?
This year it's canceled because
Right.
of COVID, right? Um, that didn't stop us from making an Oktoberfest beer
Okay.
Um, and that was part of the premise, right? Like, go to Oktoberfest, but don't fly for 8.5 hours.
Just have your own mini Oktoberfest at
We had last year. We're not sure what we're gonna do this year with the COVID restrictions, and
okay.
like, we also don't want to be responsible for an outbreak somewhere.
Yeah, that would be terrible. But so
It's weird
Oktoberfest,
times. So
it's
we actually made a lot more cans and kegs this time around.
okay.
So
Okay.
people can take the Oktoberfest cans that we have in the stores very soon here and have their own Oktoberfest. We have a couple of like the authentic Oktoberfest steins with our logo on it and in the tap room that people can buy
Mhm.
if they want to, and then 3 cans of ours fill 1 liter stein perfectly.
That's cool.
There's 2 1 liter steins in a 6 pack.
Where did where did Oktoberfest start in Germany? Is it a
In
particular
Munich.
city? Munich.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was originally a wedding ceremony, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay. Uh, and it's hundreds of years old.
Yeah, I'm not too certain how old it is, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's older than Canada.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, that's awesome. I think that's a really good summary of the company and what you guys stand for. And
You got me very honest this time around.
well, that's the idea. It's just have an honest conversation.
Yep.
Do you guys have any kind of core philosophies or, I guess, advice to people that are starting out in business or entrepreneurship?
You'll get a lot of setbacks,
Okay.
and persistence is key.
Hmm.
And what I found is if there's a door that's closing, there's at least 2 other ones that are opening. So
Okay.
the important part is to be able to pivot, right? Like
Hmm.
adjust and adapt. For example, last year our bottling plant went down catastrophically to a point that we was just scrap metal.
Hmm.
But because luck favors the prepared,
Yeah.
a week later we had a canning line in-house that was built in Black Diamond 3 kilometers from the brewery.
Really
Yeah. And
interesting.
so we knew that because we've been in contact with them for a long time before then. And we have great investors that are willing
Hmm.
to come up with creative solutions,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And then again, like, make sure that you don't blindly accept money from anybody if you go
Hmm.
out and raise money.
Hmm.
Make sure you vet them extensively, not only for their fiscal capacities,
Yeah.
but also are they aligned with what you see the company going, where it's going, how it's going there, what the priorities are for the company, right? That would be the most important one, because if you have that checked off, then you start having loyal investors that might be able to help you out to a pickle. And we've had a couple pickles.
Hmm.
And part of it was we are still here because of our, like, investors.
Okay.
And now it's coming home, like the reward is coming this year. And so that's, again, it all, make sure you have a good business plan, make sure you know where you want the business to go.
Hmm.
You don't have to have the plan on how exactly to go there. You just need to have a target
Very
and
cool.
don't lose sight of the target.
How about advice to your younger self? Any advice to your, say, 25, 30-year-old entrepreneur self?
Don't be too don't be too stubborn in your opinions.
Okay.
Like, for the longest time, I wanted to have a very traditional brewery, which would include 500 milliliter bottles, right?
Mhm.
Packaging. If you're in a market, you better know your market.
Mhm.
What does the market want? What can the market support? In Germany, that's would be fine. 500 milliliter bottles is a standard there,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And there is actually a whole infrastructure to reuse and recycle those bottles. In fact, I brought in the 500 ml bottles from Germany.
Yep.
But here, those bottles will be one-way bottles.
Right.
And because they're bottles, people here like to go hiking and everything, right? Like they don't like to bring that because the bottle weighs exactly the same as empty as it does full, essentially, right?
Right.
And it takes up as much space too. So us going from bottles into cans made a big difference. And for the longest time, I didn't believe anybody saying that because why? I'm Germanic too stubborn, as my very British board member likes to say. But be nimble, be open-minded about stuff that people might tell you, and try and read a little bit between the lines, and don't close your eyes or ears to opportunities or other opinions.
All right.
And I've been and I am very stubborn.
Yeah, well, we can all be stubborn here and there, I suppose. So that's
it's just stubbornness has benefits and disadvantages, as everything does.
For sure. Well, that's great. I think that's a really good, like I said, summary of the motivations behind the business, what the business is about, where you guys are headed, the sustainability. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show. That was awesome.
Yeah.
And good luck with your business too.
Thank you. We appreciate it. I'll have to come down and we can do a part 2 for an actual beer one of these days.
Yes, or potentially like a virtual tour through the brewery.
Yeah.
That could work too.
I love it. Well, we'll connect for part 2 in a few months.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Hold on. 1 sec. Yeah.